Chapter one is focusing on professionalism, the history of culinary arts, where we've been, where we are, and where we are going. First, start off with a few quotes. One of my favorites here: "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of education." Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. To me, it's a very, very important thing as far as from the college level. My job as a professor is to teach you to think critically and to think intensively. You are the future chefs of Central Illinois and beyond, and you need to learn how to be a problem solver. And that's my goal. That's the goal of all of the chefs here within the program, is to teach you the skills to help you solve problems when it's all said and done, because that's what you're going to have to do out in the industry. Another one that I really like, Chef Thomas Keller said, "When you acknowledge, as you must, that there is no such thing as perfect food, only the idea of it, then the real purpose of striving towards perfection becomes clear. To make people happy, that is what cooking is all about." Something really you need to think about being in this industry. Food is entirely subjective. What one person thinks is amazing, somebody's going to think is okay. You're not going to please everybody all the time when it comes to your food and how they perceive it to taste. But our industry is about making people happy. In fact, my running joke and my rule is kind of, our job is to do everything we legally can to make our customer happy, because that's what is going to get them to come back to your place. And that's kind of the idea and the thought process you need to have in the back of your mind being in this industry. This is the hospitality industry. Our job is to make people happy. And then Chef Eric Rippert, "The art of cooking is when you mix craftsmanship at the highest level with creativity." The two of those come together really, really nicely, but you need the mix. So it's great to be creative, but you need to have the craftsmanship. The craftsmanship is the skill set, and that's what you're here to learn. You're here to learn that craftsmanship. You'll get time for creativity in other classes, but this class in particular is really focused on the craftsmanship. It's focused on your skills, learning that foundation in order for you to build upon it to be successful out in the industry as culinarians. I think my last one here, David Chang. "I don't think there's any chef that is born great like in music or in sports. You have to burn yourself. Messing up makes you a better chef." Everything is not going to turn out perfect, ladies and gentlemen. You are going to make mistakes, but you need to learn from those mistakes. That's going to make you a better culinarian. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Step outside the comfort zone and really stretch your abilities and that craftsmanship that you're going to be developing during your time that you're with me, during the time that you're in the program, and as a professional. So, be always conscientious about that. Is you have to practice, you have to keep working at it in order to get good. It's not going to be something that's going to come to you overnight. You're going to find out with knife skills that, you're not going to be great at knife skills your first time. You're going to have to practice and practice and practice more in order to become good at it. When you see me do my knife skills, I've been doing this for about 2 decades. So I've had a little bit of practice. You'll get there, but just remember, you have to keep working at it in order to get good at it. So let's take a little history lesson here. So we're going to go back to about the 1500s, to the advent of the Middle Ages, when we look at the development of the guild system. So the culinary guilds were developed to create this structure in the preparation of certain foods. And so each guild had a monopoly, so to speak, on a type of food. So you'd have a cheesemakers guild, you'd have a bread bakers guild, you would have a butchers guild, and they would take people in to learn the craft and work their way up from apprentice to a journeyman and then eventually to a master that would be teaching those apprentices and helping those journeymen along the way. And really, that timeline lasted for a very, very, very long time. That's kind of the way everything ran. And it was information that was passed down from teacher to student. Let's fast forward then to the 1700s, mid 1700s, and we see the emergence of what we would consider the first restaurant. So Monsignor Bollinger was an innkeeper around Paris, and he realized that, you know, these people are traveling long ways to get into Paris. They get to his hotel, you know, and they have no place to eat. There wasn't a restaurant or anything like that. They had to go into the city, go to the bread guild to get the bread, go to the meat guild to get the meat. You know, they didn't have a way that it was all put together. And so what he did is he created what was considered, they called it a restorative. And it wasn't like going to a restaurant now where you ordered off a menu. It was kind of like going to mom and dad's. You had two choices, take it or leave it. So, you know, they had maybe a stew that they could purchase and eat there on premise while they were there to stay the night. Well, of course, the guilds were all up in arms because, you know, they felt that they were taking away from their business. Well, it went through the legal process, and it was found that indeed Bollinger actually was not breaking any laws, and he could actually serve these restoratives to his guests while they were staying in his establishment. Fast forward a little bit further, and we get into the French Revolution. Didn't think you'd be getting a history lesson, right? Today, or wherever you're looking at this. 89 to 99 in the 1700s is actually really important culinarily wise, because during the French Revolution, the social structure in France changed. They got rid of the kings and queens, dukes and duchesses, and all of the monarchy, as well as the guilds, were all abolished. So with that being said, you have to think, okay, there's no more monarchy, there's no more guilds. Where did all the chefs go? Because they were pretty much working for the kings and queens, dukes and duchesses, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now they're gone. So what do we do? So what ended up happening is we have the beginnings of what we consider the restaurant industry. The chefs that were once working for the kings and queens were now opening up shops and serving this new middle class that actually had disposable income to spend. So they would go and open up restaurants, or they would go and open up their own shops to sell products to the general public and to especially this emerging middle class. And so because of the French Revolution, we see this emergence of food shops, specialty shops especially, and this budding restaurant industry that was now feeding this emerging middle class that had this expendable income for them that they could use. So that's really kind of that tipping point where we really see this change to a precursor to what we know now as the restaurant industry. Then we're going to jump into the early 19th century, and we're going to talk about a chef who really paved the way for what we know as classic French cuisine. And we look at, it's called Grand Cuisine of the early 19th century, of the 1800s. And the chef is known as Anton Carême. Chef Anton Carême. A lot of times they'll leave off his first name. You'll just hear Carême or Chef Carême. He was known as the Cook of Kings and the King of Cooks. So if you look at his time frame, he was alive during the end part of the French Revolution, and then, of course, into this budding restaurant industry. His goal, quote, was to achieve lightness, grace, order, and perspicuity in the preparation and presentations of food. So he started to standardize the use of roux as a thickening agent and developed a system for sauces. He popularized cold cuisine within garde manger. He designed kitchen tools, equipment, and uniforms, and he wrote and illustrated texts on culinary arts. So Chef Carême kind of was the precursor and really paved the way within Grand Cuisine to what we consider now the foundation of most culinary arts and what you would notice as far as classic cuisine. But if you really want to find really the father of classic cuisine, culinary arts, you look to the late 19th century for cuisine classique, which is the French word for classic cuisine. And the chef's name is Auguste Escoffier. So Escoffier is a term that you should probably know only for the fact that if chefs know you're going to culinary school, they might throw out the term Escoffier, and you want to make sure you don't have that deer in the headlight look when they ask you about Escoffier. He was known as the emperor of the world's kitchens. He really defined French cuisine. In fact, his definition of French cuisine is pretty much the definition of classic French food that we even look at to now. A lot of his stuff that he really perfected is things that you're actually going to learn in this class. It's based upon Escoffier's cuisine classique. He helped to further simplify food preparation and dining. He classified the 5 families of mother sauces or classic sauces that we still use to this day. In fact, you're going to learn those in the next couple weeks. That's actually going to be a test requirement for both tests, is knowing the 5 mother sauces, their liquids and thickening agents. So just a little tidbit for you for later. He wrote a lot of different text, but his most famous one is that last one there at the bottom, Le Guide Culinaire. We still use it today. In fact, if you want classic French food, that right there is kind of like the Bible of classic French food. And it's just a collection of all different types of recipes and garnishes. Now, it's not like your textbook doesn't have really cool pictures and, the setup. It's kind of boring as far as the look is concerned, but you have to remember this was done back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so it was illustration stuff wasn't really a big thing at that time. And so it was just kind of that listing out. But chefs still reference Le Guide Culinaire today, especially if you are looking at classic French cuisine. Okay? So Escoffier, definitely a major player and somebody that has given us a lot to what we do here in culinary school and what you find even out in the kitchens of today. That they might have their own takes on them, but a lot of it has a basis built upon Escoffier's classic French cuisine. Moving into the 21st century, we look at a chef by the name of Ferdinand Point. Chef Point was really the precursor for Nouvelle Cuisine. Nouvelle means new cuisine. And so with Nouvelle Cuisine, he took Escoffier's classic cuisine and refined it and made it modernized in that it lightened it up. You're going to see when we get into the mother sauces and stuff, I think by modern standards, they're considered pretty heavy sauces. Chef Point and Nouvelle Cuisine really started looking at lightening up, letting the natural flavors of the food show through and not being, quote, masked by the sauces and accompaniments that were going along with it. So Chef Point really laid that groundwork for the Nouvelle Cuisine, which really came about, especially in the 1960s and 70s. Another 20th century chef that really came into play, we'll talk about a second, is Alice Waters. But when we look at the 20th and 21st century, we see a lot of changes within our industry. We see a lot of influences within our industry. People are looking at bold ethnic cuisines, and Asian and Latin American cuisine is really, really popular even right now. California, or New American cuisine, we'll talk about in a second. Fusion cuisine, and of course, right now, the big thing, of course, is farm to table. California or New American cuisine, that is attributed to Chef Alice Waters. She opened up a very famous restaurant, Chez Panisse, in 1971, and her goal was to serve fresh, seasonal, and locally grown produce. She spent a lot of her time honing her craft in France, and she realized that, when she was cooking in France, they wanted produce, they went to the farmer, or they went to the market, the farmer's market. They wanted fish, they went to the fishmonger. They went to the butcher for the meat. They didn't do a one-stop shop through a U.S. Foods or GFS or something along those lines. They actually got it from the people that were locally there. And when she went back to California, she said, you know what, why aren't we doing this now? And she really started that California cuisine where it was locally sourced, fresh, seasonal, and she was working as much as she could with the local farmers and such, and not necessarily relying on the big food distributors as far as most of the ingredients and stuff wherever she could. Now, California or New American cuisine in that time frame in California is great. Illinois is kind of tough because January comes around. There's not a whole lot of fresh, seasonal, locally grown produce that we're going to be able to pick up. But again, that was kind of a precursor to kind of what we see right now, which we'll talk about in a sec. Fusion cuisine. America has always been a melting pot of flavors. And so in the mid 80s, all the way into really the 2000s or so, we see this thing of fusion cuisine where ingredients or preparation methods from one ethnic region is combined with another, or maybe even two or three. I told you on the first day that I spent time at Lindsay's on Liberty as the chef there. That's actually where I did my internship as well. And when Lindsay's first started, they were known as a fusion restaurant. They were a French Asian fusion restaurant. So French ingredients with Asian techniques, or vice versa, or a combination of them. The only problem, if you want to see it that way, of fusion cuisine is you are limited to what cuisines you are fusing together. So as a French Asian fusion restaurant, to use fettuccine noodles, that doesn't make sense because fettuccine is Italian and you're doing French Asian. So it does have some limitations that way, at least in regards to if you're trying to be true to that fusion concept. But again, it can be a lot of fun because you're taking these two different cuisines and mashing them together and making some really fun flavor combinations that are kind of outside the box or outside the classic when it comes to flavors. Of course, farm to table movement is a huge thing where we are incorporating those global flavors and ingredients, but also looking for stuff that's locally grown. Right now, we are at a peak time in Central Illinois. We're getting all this wonderful produce and such that we are able to now use in our restaurants and in our home kitchens and stuff like that. It focuses on food served in season, and it's also helping to protect those original heirloom varieties, things that were originally came together, and then we have these hybrids and crosses that came up. Some of those heirlooms have started to go away. Well, we find that with these farmers markets and stuff, these heirloom varieties are seeing a resurgence. An interesting part of this is, what you consider your cuisine. We'll talk about modernists in a second, but I think a lot of chefs, unless you are cooking Italian or you're cooking French or you're cooking Asian, I think a lot of people say, I cook American cuisine, or they'll use the moniker of the New American cuisine, but not necessarily like Alice Waters. But New American cuisine, I think, is a cool catch-all because in American cuisine, like I said earlier, we are a melting pot of flavors. So in New American cuisine, there are no boundaries. It's only limited by your imagination and your customers' willingness to try the food that you're creating. So I think you see a lot of that with chefs. If they ask, what style do you like to cook or what's your preferred style of cooking, I think you'll hear New American cuisine or some sort of variant of that fairly regularly, only because, as I said, you really don't have boundaries. It's just limited by your imagination. A newer thing on the scene is, of course, modernist cuisine. The other term you might hear is molecular gastronomy, although I know Chef Keith actually hates that word, so I don't say it that often. He's actually teaching the modernist class, or what we call modern cuisine right now, as a topics. But what it is, it's actually a study of chemistry and physics in food preparation. So it's like taking the science lab into the kitchen. And we're using techniques and stuff that have been kind of reserved for the big food companies like Kraft and stuff that have been doing the box meals and doing these things from the grocery stores, and bringing them as techniques into our kitchens. So you can do things like reinvent cooking using ingredients and machinery from food manufacturing. So you can take a liquid and turn it into a liquid sphere. which is crazy. It's something that Chef Keith's class does in modern cuisine, but you can take, a mango puree and you can turn it into a little like piece of mango caviar, but it's just that liquid puree, but it has a light skin around it, edible skin that turns it into a little sphere. And then when you bite into it, it kind of pops and you've got that puree that's inside of it. You can turn products into powders. With a couple different things, you can take, let's say, olive oil, and you can powderize it and turn it into an olive oil powder that you can sprinkle on top of a dish, and it has that powdery texture that then as soon as it hits your mouth and your saliva, it turns it kind of back into that olive oil consistency. So again, a different way of playing around with textures and flavor profiles. um, El Bulli in Spain is one of the real predecessors when it came to modernist cuisine. And we see, a lot of things that have evolved from there. And when you look at El Bulli, I mean, small tasting plates, as many as 35 courses. That's crazy to think about that. But, things that are sensationalized like that really kind of started that. And you're using equipment, ingredients that you usually find in food manufacturing. So Chef Keith's class, in modern cuisine, they utilize the immersion circulators, of course, for the ubiquitous sous vide now. And they use, mine just went blank. The spinners to help to separate out liquids from solids. And so they can actually do these separations. You look at the spherification. We have our freeze dryer now that we can utilize to give different textures and stuff along those lines. It's amazing the different things that they can do, utilizing liquid nitrogen to blast freeze products. Those are all things that actually Chef Keith's class does in modern cuisine. And if it's something that you're interested in, I know he'll be teaching it again, maybe even next fall. So if that's something you're interested in, that is a topics class that you can definitely be on the lookout for. Modern food service operations, things that are second nature to us, not that long ago within our grandparents, time frame, we're all considered new. We use stoves instead of cooking off of a fireplace or over a fire. We have freezing and refrigeration available, so we don't have to can and keep in different preservation methods. Transportation, trains and air shipping gives us so much option, like bananas. Bananas are just an everyday thing. But you think about time of your grandparents, if they had a banana and they lived here in central Illinois, that was a really special thing because it wasn't something that they were getting overnighted. It was a really special thing to be able to get those bananas from where they're being grown in South America or Hawaii and actually get them to Peoria or central Illinois area. So things we take for granted now, just a couple of generations ago were things that they weren't seeing or was just on the cusp as far as that technology was concerned. Food supplies, the fact that we are globally sourced. As I said, bananas we can get anytime we want. You want to get a pineapple? Hey, not a problem. You can get those 365 days a year from your grocery store, where before that wasn't something that was done. It was a special occasion thing if you could even get them. Hybridization and genetic modification meant new varieties, meant foods that were less susceptible to blight and bacterias and stuff. So you got larger crops and stuff. Although, of course, GMOs, genetically modified organisms, could have, and some people look at it, have unforeseen consequences. Of course, that's still even up at debate right now as far as what's going on with GMOs as opposed to our heirlooms and stuff. We do see some regulation within that as well. But, it definitely has ushered in a new era as far as food supplies and food sources are looking at. New customer concerns. Customers, it impacts us. People are aware of sanitation and making sure that we're serving food that's not going to make people sick. They're concerned about nutrition and diet. We are looking for more items that are potentially more heart healthy, or on the lighter side type of thing. We also look at public safety with consumer concerns, with government inspections, whether it's the health department coming in to inspect our kitchen, or the FDA and regulating and inspecting butcher shops and processing plants, things like that. There's regulations on labeling, on what you can and can't put on a label. And then, of course, new interest in the local and, of course, the organic grown foods also are things that we have to be aware of as culinarians in our industry. Local production of food, we've talked about a little bit. We're seeing these local or regional farms and chefs building relationships with these farmers. So you are actually getting these local ingredients. I think people have this misconception that if you're going to go local, you have to go 100% local, and that doesn't make sense in most cases, especially here in Peoria. You know that there's only so much we can get locally. And so create a goal. Maybe you're going to do 5% of your food is coming from a local source. And then maybe next year you try to make that goal 7% or 10% or whatever. And you can keep creating goals. The farmers will appreciate, because you are giving them business, but they are realistic in knowing that 100% of your produce is not necessarily going to come regionally or locally, especially in mid-January. So it's, developing those relationships. What can you get during those different times of year, and how you can incorporate them into your menus, and make sure people understand that, hey, this product is coming from XYZ farm, or it's coming from, these local places, and, create that partnership with those farmers and such. Of course, sustainability is another big thing right now, about protecting our natural resources, minimizing the distance that food travels to an establishment, so minimizing those food miles, looking for places that you avoid pesticides and help to reduce packaging so there's less landfill waste, places that are composting scraps. We compost our fruits and vegetables and such as well, for help for sustainability. Anything that's a fair trade certified food to promote sustainability, especially if stuff is coming from areas outside of the United States. So there's a lot of different things that you can do as a culinarian, and especially when you get in and as a chef, to help with that sustainable movement, if you so choose to. So looking at the kitchen, we look at what's called a brigade. And the brigade is the way that we staff the kitchen. So each person has tasks assigned to them. And Escoffier is credited with developing this system. So the modern brigade, you have an executive chef or a chef de cuisine, and that chef typically has a sous chef, one or two of them, their assistants, then different area chefs, some line cooks, maybe a pastry chef. You might have apprentices or interns. And then depending on the type of place, you might have just short order cooks. You're working at a Denny's, you don't necessarily have area chefs for it. You have a short order cook that is cooking multiple different things, typically off one of the same cooking surfaces and such. So that's kind of the short version of what we see in the modern kitchen. But even now, we do use a lot of terms within the classic kitchen. This will be on test number 1, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be matching, and you're going to need to match the name with what their position is. And this is also all in chapter 1. So the person in charge of the kitchen is typically the chef or the chef de cuisine. In a small establishment, they'll probably be called the executive chef. But if you go to, let's say, a place like Paradise Hotel and Casino has multiple food outlets. So the executive chef is over all of the food outlets, the buffet, the steakhouse, the bar, the catering at the hotel. That's the executive chef. Each of those establishments has somebody that's running that kitchen. That would be the chef de cuisine. So you're going to have a chef de cuisine in the buffet. You're going to have a chef de cuisine at the hotel. You're going to have a chef de cuisine at the steakhouse. You get the idea. So that's the chef, or the chef de cuisine would be in charge of the kitchen. And then they are supported by one or more sous chefs. All right. Then you would have sometimes an aboyeur, which is, or also known as the expediter. Then you would have the station chefs, which are the chefs de parte, not the chefs de party, but parte means station. Okay. And to get more specific, you have different ones that are underneath here. So that first one is saucier. Saucier is in charge of sauteed dishes and sauce making. So the formal name is chef de saucier. Okay. But you would just sometimes shorten it out and just call it the saucier. Okay. Across from that is the poissonnier. That's actually the fish chef. That's one, if you had a really big kitchen, you might have somebody that's just doing fish dishes. A lot of times the saucier will take up what the poissonnier is doing, especially if it's a sauteed fish dish. Underneath the saucier is the rôtissier. So that would be roasted meats. Also grilled meats usually fall under the rôtissier. Across from rôtissier is the potager. The potager or potage is the chef that's in charge of soups, stews, and stocks. So they do a lot of the kind of the prep work, the base stuff that goes along with it. Underneath rôtissier is the légumier. The légumier is in charge of starches and legumes, so potatoes and rice and grains and other dishes like that. Most of the time, though, the potager and the légumier are for larger kitchens, kind of like the poissonnier. So if you have somebody that's doing side dishes, you're doing the entremenet, which is across from légumier. The entremenet is in charge of side dishes, and those are like the combination of the potager and the légumier. Underneath the légumier is the garde-manger. You've heard me say this already a couple times. Garde-manger is anything and everything cold related. So you've got your salads, you've got sandwiches, hors d'oeuvres, and appetizers fall under there. Sausage making, food preservation. It's extensive enough that we have a class devoted entirely just to garde-manger, which we'll take down the road. Underneath garde-manger is pâtissier. Pâtissier is the fancy French word for the pastry chef. So breads and pastries fall under the pâtissier. And then across from garde-manger is the tournant. The tournant is a little bit different in that the tournant doesn't have a specific station. The tournant is known as the swing chef or the relief cook. So the tournant is there to help plug up holes. So let's say the saucier calls in sick, the tournant can jump in and do the saucier. Or maybe the garde-manger is getting behind schedule, and so the tournant jumps in to help get the garde-manger caught up. So that's why it's the swing chef or the relief cook. You've got, a lot of different possibilities. The tournant, because they have to jump in wherever it really needs to be one of the more experienced line cooks or one of the experienced station chefs, because they need to go wherever they need to be put in order to get the job done. And a lot of times the tournant is the next step for that is getting into management as far as like a sous chef or something along those lines. Okay? Then underneath the chefs de parte are the commis. And the commis are the cooks, assistant cooks, or in some cases, the interns or those that are doing apprenticeships. And so in a larger kitchen, you would have, let's say, a chef de parte, and then you might have one or more commis underneath the chef de parte. So using that saucier example, you would have a chef de saucier, and then you might have one or two commis de sauciers that work underneath the chef de saucier. Okay, so that was the classic kitchen brigade. And as I said, this will be on test number 1, but it's going to be, for example, I'll have the word saucier there, and you're going to match it with the description, like what I just talked about as far as saute station and preparing sauces, and garde-manger, cold food. So you'll match the classic name with that position that's attached to. So that will be on test number 1 for you, ladies and gentlemen. On the home stretch here, what does it take as far as to be a professional chef and to be a culinarian? First off is knowledge. That's why you're here, is to learn. And remember, your learning is lifelong. It does not stop when you're out of school. It should be a continuous thing throughout your professional career. You're going to develop your skills. And remember, like I said earlier in this lecture, the only way you're going to get better is with experience, with practice, practice, practice. Taste. You're going to you need really to taste everything you make. And I implore you, taste everything. Now, if you're allergic to something, don't taste it, because I don't want that to hit you with an EpiPen because you ate something that you're allergic to and now your throat is closing up. But barring that, try everything at least once. Even if it's something you don't like, try it again. You never know what you might like that you didn't realize that you actually liked it. And you know what? If you try it and you don't like it and you spit it out or whatever, that's fine by me. Food is subjective, like I said at the beginning of this lecture. If you still don't like it, that's perfectly fine. But at least you've tasted it and you know what it should taste like. But please, please, please give it a try. Taste everything that is made and everything that's put in front of you. Judgment calls are going to be things such as how much seasoning needs to go in, how much salt do I need to put in this dish, to how long until this is done. Again, judgment calls are going to be easier with more experience. The more you do it, the better you're going to be able to make those judgment calls. Dedication, again, give yourself 110% to what you are doing. That's my expectation of all of you as culinarians, is that you're going to dedicate your learning, and you're really going to give 110% to make sure that what is being done to the best of your ability. Of course, have professional ethics. Make sure you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Always be professional in everything you do. You develop these great lifelong friendships, and it's like a second family within this industry. But even if you don't necessarily get along with somebody personally, be professional with them. Of course, have pride in what you do, no matter whether if you are flipping burgers at Burger King or working at a 5-star restaurant. Make sure you're always putting out that best and have pride in the product that you are producing for your guests. Some basic things with ethics. Conduct yourself with honesty, fairness, and integrity. Try to avoid conflict of interest or misuse of monies. Do not discriminate others or engage in sexual harassment. Represent yourself, your work, and your accomplishments accurately. Don't try to oversell yourself. Make sure you're being accurate in how you represent yourself as a professional. Support your professional growth of yourself and your colleagues. Cooperate in a fair manner. Respect your team and respect your supervisors. And of course, you want to make sure you're complying with all laws and regulations that you deal with on a daily basis as well. There's a lot of career choices within this industry. Of course, entry-level positions in hotels, catering, and restaurants. You can focus in areas. You can focus in garde manger and pastries, butcher stations, roundsmen as far as the different things with tournants. You can get into catering. You can get into a la carte. You can get into healthcare. You can get into corporate dining. I mean, a lot of different areas outside the traditional hotel restaurant side that's possible too. If you want to get into some of the higher level stuff, you can get into places like with craft and developing recipes or food manufacturing, test kitchens. I will tell you this though, most of those jobs do require bachelor's degrees. So if it's something that you're interested in that end, let's have a talk so we can help you on your way to getting into that area. Personal chefs in private homes. There's the cruise industry, of course, college food service, some other options too. That last word there, it looks like stage, but we're not actors. In this case, it's called a stage. And a stage is an unpaid work opportunity. So it's kind of like a short internship. You want to get your foot in the door and kind of see what a kitchen is like. And so you talk to the chef and see if you can stage for a weekend in the kitchen and just kind of see the ins and outs. And it's kind of almost like an informal interview too, because you can kind of see what the kitchen is like and if it's a good fit for you. And then the chef is going to see if you would possibly make a good fit maybe in the future for that kitchen as well. So that's something to think about down the road. Towards the end of your time, you're going to do a 16-week internship. But if you're looking to kind of explore some different areas and see, within Central Illinois and beyond, stage could be an opportunity if you want to take that leap as well. So that is the end of chapter 1 on professionalism, where we've been, where we are, what we get to look forward to, and things to think about as far as your life as a professional and as a culinarian starting in the industry. Thanks for watching the um, lecture, and we'll see you soon.